Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Dancing with Damage. I'm Ian, your resident philosopher.
And I'm Abby, your resident author.
And today we talk about monitoring the housing distribution system, sort of tagging on to what we were talking about last episode. And if you're following along in your copy of The Social Blueprint, first of all, thank you for doing that. And second of all, I think you're at chapter 38.
Ooh.
And if I'm wrong, you're looking for the title that is called The Girl in the China, I think, or The Child in the China. One of the two. It's a fable where a young person is given a china. What is it called?
Child in the China. It is chapter 38 on page 170, should you be following along.
I like Child in the China best because it's alliteration.
Yeah, it is.
That's a fable where that's a fable. That's all I'll say.
I thought that's what you were going to say. I thought that was the conclusion of your sentence. That's a fable.
That's a fable. So I don't know what you were expecting. Maybe the whole enchilada, the whole enfablada. So it's about a young girl who has a china cup, much like one of these fine mugs we would have here.
Mm-hmm.
And her mom says, don't drop it. Got to be careful.
Yep.
Don't drop the china.
Don't drop it.
Little girl said, I won't, because I asked for it, because I want to be like you, mama. That's how they talk in this fable. And what do you know? Time goes by, not too long. Child is not
Careful.
What do you think happens, Abby?
Thinks she breaks the mug.
Breaks the mug or the cup or whatever it was. And so the mom says, what? You can't have that anymore? Can't have another china mug? You broke that one? Maybe later. But for now, you get a plastic cup. Can't break that one.
Not as fun.
Moral of the story is if you get something really precious things are normally a little fragile. You got to treat them with the care they need. And Abby, just to kind of take us all back a few chapters, like what have we been talking about for the last couple episodes?
We were talking about making certain things that are very fundamental for humans more accessible. So things like exercise, making it so exercise is accessible and free and something you can get paid to do to really give you the incentive and to validate in your mind the ability to go and do so and use that time for yourself rather than doing something else you might feel that you have to do.
Yes. Essentially, we have been through Act 2 and Act 3 of The Social Blueprint, proposing policy and changes that would cost a lot up front. But then as they were being implemented, I said that kind of oddly, implemented. I said it like implemented, but I guess that's how you always say it. Well, now I don't know. Now it sounds strange. Anyway, as they were being implemented, that sounded right. Costs would be saved on those 3 safety nets that the modern social model often takes the brunt of failing to follow the practice of stitch in time saves 9. That's the welfare system, the justice system, and the medical system taking the brunt of that. And so all of these policies are designed, in essence, to fix the problem upstream so that downstream you don't have a flood that is much harder to deal with.
And I know it sounds idealized, but the thing is, governments, especially in Canada, always pay for social benefits. So this is just recommending changing what those benefits are. And again, it's not necessarily more expensive because especially in the long run, if people improve themselves and they have stable housing, stable income, stable jobs that are meaningful, good mental health, good exercise, good nutrition, then the amount of money the other systems, the safety net systems, as you mentioned, the justice system, the welfare system, and the health system save more than make up for the cost of implementing these systems in the first place.
That's right. And so we're not the only people who want these kinds of services to be made available. It's very common for people to say they want more proactive services that will solve a problem and be more proactive than reactive. I mean, that's just basic kindergarten stuff. But what we feel society has been missing is understanding that right now there's such a high level of damage, in other words, such a high level of individuals deliberately self-sabotaging their own lives and society deliberately self-sabotaging its own future, that it's impossible to go from that wounded state to going to solve the problems that we're talking about. That's why the social blueprint is a graduated system that starts with understanding damage and then slowly reducing it. because someone who has just torn their hamstring can't get up and run a 100-meter dash.
No.
But if they know, first of all, what's wrong with them, that their hamstring is torn and that it's not something else like
A broken leg.
Yeah.
Or
a hangnail.
I was trying to think of leg-related injuries, but I guess if you're really confused.
That would make more sense. Like sometimes you could think you don't know what it is. So you find it's a hamstring that's torn, and then you get some rest on it and you do some rehabilitation, and then you can run. That's the philosophy of the social blueprint. And, another way you could think of it is actually, it reminds me of, we talk about Harry Potter a lot, but don't blame us, because Abby and I are of the generation that when Harry Potter came out, it was a really sensational thing. There are some things that you probably remember in your childhoods that were just big moments. Like the most somber moment probably for us, for Abby and I, was 9/11, right? I remember where I was. Do you remember where you were?
Yeah.
Because you would not have been very old.
I was in grade 2.
Oh, what was I?
You would have been in grade 7?
That's right.
Yeah.
We weren't in the same school though, so I cannot confirm she was in grade 2.
We just know how old we are.
Where were you?
I was in class, and I remember being afraid because my mom's cousin lives in America, and I wasn't sure if it affected her because I was very young and didn't understand how the geography of America worked. So I was frightened that she might have been in peril.
That's very thoughtful.
Yeah.
That's very thoughtful. I was in the kitchen. Anyway, I was talking on a phone with a cord to someone.
A corded phone. And how did the person on the phone tell you?
That's right. That's right. Someone called me to give me the news. I guess in grade 7, I was someone who people reported the news to because I guess they figured I couldn't get it myself. It's very strange. But in any event, what I'm getting at is Harry Potter, because I remember, and this is in the movies. Now, Abby and I are big fans of the books, but in the movies, there's a scene, and I think it's in the books too, where the protagonist, Harry Potter, the young wizard, has to get into, there's this sword he has to get at the bottom of this pond.
The Sword of Gryffindor.
Nerd. Sure. Of course, it's the Sword of Gryffindor.
And it's a lake.
The Sword of Godric Gryffindor, if you must know. Nerd. And in any event, so there's this body of water, sword's at the bottom. And he wants to get the sword. It's important for his quest. Okay? But there is a sheet of ice on top of it. So he can see the sword at the bottom of the lake through the ice. But first he must break the ice and swim down to it. And so the social blueprint is a little bit like that pond with the sword at the bottom. And the sword at the bottom of it is like good policy that many people, if you ask them, and Abby and I have asked many people.
Thousands.
Just so many.
So many.
It was an asking spree. It was madness. But if you ask people, generally there's a consensus that these kind of policies are positive. Actually, we've had very good feedback about, the year of military service and
The baby license especially.
that was a surprising one to me. When we started asking people about the baby license, the most common answer was, I would go for it, but nobody else would. It was funny because many, many people said the same thing, which means that they would go for it and everyone else probably would. So it's kind of like
It's interesting how social perception is so skewed that something can be universally accepted or hated, but because no one talks about it and because of the social perception that currently exists based on the zeitgeist of the community and the media and society, you assume that no one else shares your opinion, which you think is controversial. But it's entirely possible so many other people indeed share that opinion, but no one dares break the taboo of speaking of it.
There you go. So anyway, there's Harry. He wants the sword. And so the sword is like those good social policies, but damage and understanding why humans, despite generally wanting positive things, can't quite get them. Damage is like that sheet of ice that you can't really see. It's sort of invisible unless you know to look for it or know it would be there. And then you can break the ice and swim down and get the sword. But you can't do it all right away. It's not a one-step process. And so that's what we feel a lot of political parties and political leadership and political will has really been missing. And that's why we wrote the book. Anyway, what is today's topic?
So last episode, we talked about the idea that there should be more access to housing. And there already is sort of social housing, but in practice, at least in our experience, it's not usually the nicest of housing. And usually it's not managed very well. And there's a lot of services that are needed, like maybe the hot water doesn't work properly, or maybe there's no smoke detector or carbon monoxide detector, or maybe there's mold or there's some issue beyond the tenant's control. And their job is to tell the landlord, but maybe the landlord isn't super into helping. So there's a lot of people who want to access social housing because it will help them greatly and they qualify. But the housing available, there's a lot of competition to get it, but also it's not always in the greatest condition. So what if, instead of people feeling like they can't handle housing, now that we have all of these systems in place and our tax dollars are going farther because there's fewer people leaning on the systems costing so much money, what if the government owned the houses? And what if people were able to apply based on merit to live in them? And what if those people then, because they had a place to live, were able to focus on their family and their communities and their jobs and all of a sudden be more productive citizens? And then now all of a sudden, with this one vital need taken care of, we have more productive people making more money, inputting more money into society, and actually generating more tax dollars than they otherwise would have.
Excellent.
Excellent.
Yes. So in the last chapter, we talked about a housing acquisition system for a state so that there would be a large reservoir of public housing for the state to administer as required. Now, in Canada, and I'm sure in other nations around the world, if you look at the average houses that existed, if you threw a rock at a house,
Don't do that.
a metaphorical rock and a metaphorical house, odds are you're going to hit one that is in the private sector. In other words, it was bought privately, it's going to be sold privately. There are, of course, public housing projects, but they are the minority. I assume in most developed countries, certainly in the ones I'm aware of, we'll have to check that out after. If you know of a country that has switched to mainly public housing, good for them. And certainly that's something to be applauded. But I don't think it's really been done to this point. But certainly in most places it hasn't. So we envision a system with the last chapter where over time, and again, this plan takes time, 30, 40, 50, 60, eventually 70% or more of housing would be, of structures that existed as dwellings, would be in government control. Now you're saying to Ian and Abby, not all houses are created equal. Some are very desirable. Some have large lawns. Some are big. Some are really close to desirable places.
Some have marble countertops in the kitchen.
Oh, nice. I didn't think of that.
Yeah, I think about that often. We don't have any, but it'd be nice.
No, they look like marble. So in any event, how would it be fair? What would be the way to administer housing to the state control? How could it be done a fair way? It's just not possible. Aha! You're sort of right, but you're sort of wrong. Because we would implement and suggest the creation of a new trade called a maintenance
Counselor.
How did you know what I was going to say? Oh, it's in the book.
I helped to write the book.
Darn it. It fits me every time. So a maintenance counselor would be, so maybe we can break this plan into two prongs. So let's do a hypothetical. Give me a letter to start names with.
B.
B? Okay.
B.
So Brittany, it's a B name.
That is a B name.
Actually, no, sorry. Brittany has a silent P in this one. Darn it. Oh, well.
Put Brittany?
It's silent. So Brittany is a young person, and in this day and age, decades from now, most likely, she's filling in an application because she wants to apply for public housing. She says, I have 2 cats.
Excellent.
Already Abby's a big fan of this.
Big fan.
She says, I am working as a PSW in this neighborhood.
Excellent.
In X neighborhood. And what else does she say?
Maybe she has like a hobby, like she likes to paint, or she does sports, or she volunteers at a cat shelter. Maybe that's how she got her cats. They were rescues.
Maybe. Okay, active volunteer at cat shelter. Cats R Us.
Can you imagine? Is
For
that
real.
a place for real? Guys, if there is a place called Cats R Us, please tell me. Just for me. Please just tell me. I will go. I will buy whatever they have to sell.
Nice.
Even if it's just cats.
Don't tell her. So anyways, so she fills out the application. She's lucky. The place she applies to, the state, the governance, which is being administered to by someone from the School of Ruling, some wise leadership at this point. We get good leaders at this point, not questionable ones. And that administration looks at this application and says, okay, you know what? We need someone in this rural town. Would you take a house out in a smaller community? I guess I already said in the application she helps out people in this community. Scratch that one. We're going to say that she wants to start up a PSW.
That makes more sense. And then she's willing to relocate. Maybe she wrote down.
Willing to relocate. I mean, you could do either or. If someone's already settled, then maybe it makes sense for them to stay where they are. But if they're willing to move, maybe move them to smaller communities. Again, remember one of our ideas in the previous episode was to re-ruralize a little bit. But either way, the point is, someone in a position to know would say, we need more PSWs in this area. Please go here. You can have this place. It's got 1 bedroom or 2 bedrooms. It's suitable for you.
1 for your cats.
1 for your cats. It's close to there's a vet clinic in town, and there's lots of people who need your services. Would you take that? Sure, she takes it. She loves it. It's a nice place, right? But, ding dong. Ding dong.
You're a ding dong.
I'm a bing bong. Anyway, knock knock. Someone's at the door. Who could it be, Abby?
The maintenance counselor.
The maintenance counselor. And his name is
Boris.
Borgum.
What's wrong with Boris?
Boris. His name is Boris. Boris is a nice guy. Maintenance counselors would have to have lots of training, similar to how peace officers needed a lot of training and sort of filtration to get rid of abusive ones, because like peace officers, a maintenance counselor would have, a lot of
Powers.
Power and responsibility. So, Boris, ding dong, can I come in, Brittany? Yep, come in. And what is Boris up to?
So the job of the counselor would be to sort of go around and see if anything needs to be done. So hopefully with the new education system, people would be able to fix minor problems in their own homes, such as maybe the tap's leaking a little bit, or they have to adjust a thermostat, or a breaker blows and they have to replace a breaker. Or maybe not the breaker, a fuse. Maybe a fuse blows and they have to replace the fuse. I know how to do that now. That's very fun. Not as hard as I thought, but I had no idea until I was taught. So maybe they do small things themselves, but the maintenance counselor would be in charge of making sure that people are treating the homes well. Because if you have a home, whether it's a sprawling mansion or a very quaint little bungalow, if you are treating it poorly, if you are letting it go into disrepair, if you are not reporting when there's an issue, for example, if you notice there's a leak and it's going to go into your basement, you made that example earlier, and it's going to damage the foundation, it's going to damage what's down there, and it's going to cause rot in the foundation, in the house. Maybe there's wood. If you can't fix it, you have to report it and say, hey, there's an issue, it needs to be fixed. And then the maintenance counselor can say, thank you, I'm coming, or I have someone who's coming. There's a lot of very talented people who work in fixing and replacing. Think plumbers, electricians, craftsmen, carpenters, the people who have a lot of skills.
Stone sculptors to fix any broken statues.
Who has what?
That doesn't apply. Carry on.
But he's basically looking for damage or problems that might occur that maybe a layperson wouldn't think to notice. Maybe, what's an example of a problem that an expert might notice and would want to fix before it became a huge problem that a layperson might not realize is a problem?
If there was some shingles missing off a roof.
Oh, that's a good one. So maybe if the shingles continue to be missing, it could cause a leak. More shingles could be missing. Maybe the shingles are loose and they could fly off and hit something, break a window, hurt somebody. I don't know how big these metaphorical shingles are, but, it's a problem. And he's also looking to make sure Brittany's taking care of her place. Because if you have a track record of taking very good care of your property, just like if you are a renter, I'm sure most of us either are or have experience renting. I know in university, I had a good track record of keeping the unit clean and in good repair. Then I could use my previous landlord as a reference and say, hey, I'm moving across town. And they'd say, yep, she pays her rent on time. She keeps it in good repair. She'll let me know if there were any issues. She's a great tenant to have. So if the maintenance counselor says, hey, Brittany's doing a great job, maybe in a couple years she wants to adopt more animals, or she finds a partner, or maybe she's thinking about having children, or she just wants to move to another area and the only houses are bigger and nicer in that area, then she has the credit, it's almost like a credit card, the credit to be able to apply for those and be accepted because she's proven she can handle the responsibility.
That's right. And Abby, we anticipate in the housing distribution system that some houses would be just much more desirable than others. But here's my question for you. Is a house that is considered luxurious easier to maintain or harder to maintain for somebody?
So much harder. I would never want what you would call a mansion or a really large house because it's just so much work to clean it because dust settles magically over everything. And if you, like us, have various animal friends and they love you and you love them, so they end up in every room and can open doors, so it doesn't matter if you close the doors. I'm looking at Darwin, the cat. He opens doors. He doesn't care. But it's so hard to maintain because there's so many rooms and you have to vacuum, you have to dust, you have to polish the windows, you have to wipe down the mirrors, you have to clean all the toilets. Unless you have a lot of people living in the space to validate the need for so many rooms, I don't know why anyone would want it. Maybe that's why people hire cleaners, but I don't believe that would be, the go-to suggestion for this era.
No. Polishing the windows is so hard because you get out the silver polish and it just smears the window.
I just meant cleaning them.
Oh, you meant washing the windows.
I meant washing them. You polish to shine. It was the wrong word, obviously.
I know. I jumped on that as soon as I could. But Abby's right. And so just like the girl with the China mug, if there's something that is breakable, like a very desirable home or in a very desirable location, then we argue that the onus should be on the person who is in receipt of that public housing to prove that they are maintaining it, i.e. Boris coming to check on it and A, to help with repairs that are beyond a normal homeowner, but B, to make sure that destruction is not being caused to that public property. Just the same way, if someone vandalizes a public park, we look down on that because it ruins it for the other people who would want to use the park. Well, the same way, if Boris comes in and he sees that the person has been punching holes in the walls, and so now that there's insulation and plumbing has been damaged and all this stuff.
Why were there holes in the wall?
Brittany was punching holes in the wall.
Brittany was?
Yep.
Why?
Because she just don't care.
She just don't care.
She just don't care. But hopefully she does. I think she will. I have faith in Brittany. But it's just Boris is looking for it, you see. So that would be maybe be grounds if Boris says, we're going to leave you some materials to patch up these holes, but you got to try and patch up the holes, or at least don't cause new holes, or maybe you get a different house because someone else wants this house perhaps. And in the same way, that is how we argue that these sort of assets would be protected. So a person would have the benefit of free public housing, which would be a massive weight off someone's shoulders. And as you said, allow them to have a more productive life.
Yeah. And if people, I don't want to get into a full economics lesson. I won't do that.
Ah,
Sorry.
I went for my coffee and I ended up high-fiving you. How unexpected.
Not to get too deep into economics, but the way the economy works is that if people are spending money, then a lot of tertiary businesses are operating, a lot of small businesses, a lot of craftspeople and tradespeople and specialists who do sort of niche but beautiful things. And they are able to make money because if you have disposable income, you have the ability to spend laterally. And you have the ability to indulge because often fair trade, well-made products, which we're arguing we should focus more on as a society because they're better for the environment, they're better for the people involved in the supply chain, are more expensive. And if you're on a very tight budget, you can't afford to be indulging in such luxuries. But let's say housing was taken care of. All of a sudden, people's disposable income increases because a huge cost weight is taken away from their ankle. I'm pretending they're anchors. And now all of a sudden, the artisan chocolate maker in town I'm fantasizing about is making chocolate and you can indulge once in a while in supporting that shop so the artist can continue to make their craft and you can continue to indulge in fair trade cocoa and beautiful, healthy truffles made of dates and magic. And maybe there's a carpenter who makes really beautiful tables and all of a sudden you can afford to buy like a really nice
And the chocolate can go on the table. It's perfect. I see now the design.
I'm just saying that the reason sometimes the economy fluctuates is because people are limited in their budget. They only buy the essentials, but 80% of businesses are selling beyond the essentials, beyond food, clothing, water, you know? So a lot of these businesses will shut down if people aren't spending laterally because they don't have the money, but all of a sudden, all of these people, most of the economy, are closing down their businesses, and then they themselves can't afford to buy anything, and then the economy crashes. It's not good. So you want people to have excess spending power to be able to buy laterally, so more businesses can flourish, and technically it adds to more taxes because you pay in income tax, but you also pay HST.
I got to tell you, Abby has a better handle on this stuff than I do. All I can tell you is we think housing debt is bad. And, you know, in terms of productivity, aren't there some, you know about this stuff, Abby, aren't some companies trying to allow their employees to be more happy in the workplace and finding as a result the company runs better and actually generates more profit?
So a lot of companies are moving towards a 4-day work week. They're allowing some employees to work from home. And they're finding that even if they shorten it to 5 or 6 hours of work a day for the same amount of pay, the output of the employees is the same or greater than when it's a longer day, because humans have a limitation to what we can do to be in peak productivity. And we want to work more hours to earn more money because we desire the freedom money gives us. But the problem is we don't have the capacity to be our best selves 100% of the time. So companies are finding that shortening work week, shortening work days allows the employees to feel rejuvenated and happy enough in those jobs to be able to output even more than they were previously. And they're making the same amount of money. So it's fantastic for everybody because the company hasn't spent extra, but they've made more output for the company. Plus, they pay less if they shorten the work week, they don't have to pay for electricity for the day everyone's at home. They save costs on the physical building that they would have had the employees coming to.
So by instituting some of the centers we've been discussing, like the exercise center and the food center, public housing system, and acquisition and distribution system that we've been talking about, we envision in this time where damage is reduced and therefore self-sacrificing and honorable behavior is more prevalent, that this will, again, reduce costs in the tax expense sector of society and increase productivity, as well as reduce human suffering. So sort of the two go hand in hand.
Mm-hmm.
And just to wrap up this notion of the maintenance counselor, in a nutshell, Boris, who would check in to make sure people were treating public housing properly and helping to keep it in good repair so that it can be passed on for as long as possible, or cautioning people who were living there to make sure they kept it up or risk loss of that public space, and perhaps in favor of a less intensive upkeep dwelling. But that's the idea of it, is that the maintenance counselor would be an essential part of the public housing system. So what would the pillars of play be for such a proposition?
You tricked me.
My deception is deep, for she was not expecting the pillars of play. We actually forgot to do it in the last episode. I will do it while Abby is finding her page, while she is page turning. So in the last episode, it was about acquiring public housing by allowing a senior to sign up for a PSW, sort of like a in-care level support in exchange for the deed of their house upon their death, which would go to the state. And so what chapter?
This is for the one you're talking about. This is for the first part of the housing sector.
The housing acquisition
This
plan?
is the housing acquisition
Okay,
plan.
so what are the pillars?
Policies should prevent isolation.
Oh, that's right, because the PSW, and I get it, yes?
Well, I'm glad you agree with what we've decided and written in a published book. And policy increases individual social value by creating quality work. And then this chapter is the child and the China. So increases social value by creating quality work. Any power lost to be replaced with a better reward. And policy should make healthy behavior easier to achieve. And damaged people are denied the power to injure. So again, the counselor would make sure that if somebody is treating, I'm sure you can picture it, maybe you've seen TV shows that sensationalize people who are unable to care properly for houses. I know there's people on the internet who show how they don't treat things well as a way to get rage bait. But those types of people would be denied the ability to stay in a nicer or larger home and be put into very simple, smaller dwellings and say, look, if you can't treat things with respect, you can't have nice things. And then people who would be willing to put in the effort would be allowed to come in and have the nicer, larger homes, which is kind of nice because, it allows people, again, based on merit to have certain things. Because I'm sure lots of us would treat things very well, but just don't have money to afford a really nice house. And I think that dream of having a nice family home should be accessible to everybody.
That's right. So 2 things real quick, because I don't know if we talked about them, but we might as well, since we're on the chapter. Maintenance counselor could also be, Abby, could it not, sort of a jack of all trades or sort of an expert contractor, if you will, to not only go in to inspect and make sure everything's running smoothly, but, I see that, as you say, you need to change out this fuse if it's an older house or this breaker or whatever. Maybe they go back to the truck and they can fix it right there.
Yep.
If they were an expert, or, a floorboard's come loose. We don't want your whole floor to come apart. So we're going to order a new board and put it in for you,
Yeah.
So that would be a very valuable work, like you're saying. It's sort of like how a peace officer we envision being an amalgamation of sort of essential services. So too could a maintenance counselor sort of be a combination of all the trades. And then the next thing I wanted to add is, could you imagine a world where in the housing distribution system of public housing assets, there might be, an opportunity for, let's say, friends or people who wanted to live in a larger house. Let's say there was a really big house. Couldn't more than one family unit live in it if there was sort of limited opportunities for housing?
I think that's a great idea. I mean, already we're starting to see a resurgence of people banding together to pay a mortgage or pay rent for a larger space, because while a larger space costs more money, the burden, if it's split between 4 to 6 people, is much less than it would be if 1 or 2 people upheld that burden by themselves. I don't know how anyone can afford to pay rent or a mortgage nowadays by themselves. I truly don't. You must have a fantastic job. So I think it's wonderful because it also is pro-social. And if you have people in your life who you love spending time with and you could live with very well, I mean, it just decreases the burden. You could split the housework, you could split the chores, you could split shopping. There's a lot of different benefits to that. And also it decreases isolation.
Thanks for tuning in. And in the next episode, we're going to be talking a little about reforming the healthcare system in developed countries.
Thanks for joining us. Have a great day.